Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED, and this is Q5 Ham Radio. I'm back with the contest crew, Randy K5ZD, Chris KL9A, Dan N6MJ, and Bill W9KKN. Each delivered a standout effort in the 2025 CQ Worldwide CW. Dan's win and world record single operator all-band run at EF8R, Chris's formidable second-place push from CQ9A, Randy's disciplined showing from his new Ohio station, and Bill's strong multi-op effort at ZF1A. First, a quick thank you to DX Engineering for supporting these conversations. Welcome back, guys. So Dan, I think I need to start with you. A new world record, probably 12,000 QSOs plus from EF8R, Canary. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, things went pretty well. I think one of the things that people don't understand is the amount of stress that we go under to partake in these events. But even though with all the stress that happened prior to the event, during the contest, and even a little bit of stress afterwards, I'm very happy with how things turned out. I went back and looked at the log again, just trying to think of is there anything that I could have done differently from what I actually did? And, other than the few times where I was having a little bit of issues, with the, from 09 to about 1200 Zulu on Sunday, with all the hallucinations and stuff like that. Other than that issue, I wouldn't have changed anything. I think everything went well, exactly how I wanted it to go, and I was very happy with the results.
So Dan and I spoke earlier today, and that video's out already. I was kind of surprised that you actually took a break in the middle of the contest.
That's something that I would never do normally, but things were so bad. Honestly, I don't know exactly what it was. Maybe it was, we're in this different time zone. I tried to acclimate as much as I could, but honestly, I was in such a poor state that it was super difficult to even operate one radio, let alone two. And so, there was a point, I think it was in the 1100 Zulu hour on Sunday. I looked at, Levi was behind me, and I looked at him like, dude, I don't know what I can do anymore. I don't even know how to operate this radio. I'm not sure what I'm doing. Help me out, and he's like, dude, go take a shower. I took his advice. I left the radio for a while, took a shower, came back, and honestly, that was the best thing I could have done. For the remainder of the contest, after that point, I was able to continue with 2 BSIQ until the end of the contest. And I was still having lots of really crazy delusions, but I made it to the end. So.
And Chris, second place from CQ9A.
Great. I actually had the exact same issues at the exact same time that Dan did. The only difference is I was able to get through it. I was expecting it. Just because I haven't been able to finish a contest in a while, so I kind of preemptively struck. But one thing that I noted in a little bit of clarity was I didn't have any caffeine other than 1 cup of coffee and some tea the last 2 hours. We didn't buy any caffeine. I didn't have anything, which I don't recommend that. That was a poor decision on my part. I really couldn't drink coffee because I was upsetting my stomach so much because I was so nauseous. So I couldn't have any more coffee, and I couldn't have any soda or anything. But I would have killed for a Red Bull or I don't know, anything. So yeah, the contest was fantastic. We've talked about it, but I think Dan's record is going to stand for a very long time.
It's been a couple days since you and I spoke for the interview. Has anything come up that you would have done differently at all?
Yeah, I would have done a couple things differently, but they were pretty small. I was talking to Dan earlier. Maybe it was worth 200 Qs. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't worth that much. I really don't think I would have done much different. We can argue that all day long. Everybody has their own philosophies, but in the end, I think I maximized pretty much as best I could. That's what you want, right? If you left nothing on the table, that's what you want to walk away with. And like I said before, I feel like I won, and that's great. It's walking away perfectly satisfied.
So you did tell me, I think off camera before, that when the contest was over, Valerie had a list of things that might have gone differently, but you didn't share with me what those items were.
Yeah, he's kind of mentioned it on Facebook. This poor guy, these station owners, we saw it in Costa Rica too. They get to watch this person operate their station for 48 hours without any input. And, they know their station better than anybody else. they know propagation better, and there were certainly things that he would have done different, things that I agree with for sure, things that I'm not sure about. It was an interesting, kind of unloading of 48 hours of observation all at once. And I kind of filed them away in memory because I wasn't really in the right mindset to think about it after the contest. It's just like, oh my gosh, what?
Is that code
But
for
he had a
you
lot
didn't
of.
listen to it at all?
No, I definitely did. I actually took notes in my phone afterwards of what he said. And a lot of it, I'm going to look at and see, how much I agree or disagree. But his points certainly had some merit, and maybe it's something I can learn from for next time. Well, there's no next time. There's no next time.
It's like, whoa,
Knew
wait a
it.
minute.
It only
We're
took
doing this
3
again?
days to
Wait for
recover.
it.
No, next contest where I'm in a multi-op. Next to multi-op.
Yeah.
I want to point one
next
thing
year.
out.
No.
I think so those guys that are not in the know, did I win the contest? It certainly appears that way. But I want to point out that Chris really did maximize that station. He had a couple things going against him. He's very modest, but I think all things considered, he had a very realistic chance of beating me. But there's 2 things that happened that kind of prevented that. The first thing was, he had on CT3 there was also a multi-2 and a multi-multi going on at the same time. So that somewhat limited the number of cues available to him. And then the second thing was that propagation was unfortunately somewhat limited because there were some disturbances. And Jose pointed this out greatly in his video before the contest, that if there are some disturbances, EA8 should prevail. And I kind of proved that point. But we've gone through this many times before. When I was operating against Chris, when I was in ZF1A and he was at TA7W, almost every single contest we went against each other, it was determined on propagation and not actual operating ability. And I'm confident to say that if Chris was operating EA8 and I was in CT3, the exact opposite would have happened. He would have won. I would have come in second. And so I think that I'm really proud of what he was able to do, especially being able to finish the contest, to do all 48 hours. I know that was a big thing for him. And, I'm happy about my victory, of course, but I also fully understand that I ended up being, luckily, in the right location at the right time, and I was able to maximize that. So I just want to point that out.
Well, it is true. We're playing a game that relies on the ionosphere as the variable, and you can't overcome it. It is what it is. So just to be able to deal with it in real time, or understand what's going on, or how to adjust your strategy, that's a big part of the game.
And Bill, tell us about ZF1A.
Sure. So, we didn't quite have to all stay up for 48 hours, but we did a 5-man multi-2, and that basically the way that we set that up was 8 hours on and 3 hours off for each guy, and we had the in-band station not manned for a couple of the slower hours where most of the mults had been worked and the run guy could have dealt with that. And it was a recurring cast of characters, except we were missing Dan. So it was N2IC, myself, N5KO, Trey, and N1C. But we also had a guy who'd operated from ZF before, actually at ZF1A, a long time ago, and that was K5WA. And this is my first time meeting him, and I just have to say he did a great job of fitting in, and definitely did a whole chunk of work. But I have to say that even this schedule, I was pretty tired, and I was just thinking to myself the whole time of Dan and Chris, of what a wuss I am, because I thought that these 3-hour breaks were just not enough, and there were times where I was sitting at the radio, but I wasn't really sitting at the radio, and I'm sure there were guys calling me like, what is this guy doing? He's just completely ignoring things, because I was just kind of zoning out as a result of being tired. But I'm sure at this 9 Zulu hour, I didn't tune in and listen to Chris or Dan at the time, but that might have been entertaining for everybody. Just what was going on there, because I was definitely suffering the whole in a lot of the same ways. I did have a couple so first of all, Dan mentioned in the last program that I've sort of always been kind of the new kid that's not the strongest CW operator at ZF. And I had a couple of really good hours. I had a couple of really bad hours, but I had a solid 5-6 hour block where I felt like I was in the flow and I could copy anything and it was just coming, one after the other and, no problems. That was the first time I really felt like that, so that was a good thing. We didn't have any major technical problems. We had a rotator that got stuck, which is sort of an interesting one. We had, the 80-meter beam was broken in a predictable way before the contest. We got the bucket truck, got that sorted out, and I'm sure the next time we go there, knock on wood, it's going to be the same exact thing again. I just don't know what to do at this point. But anyway, I would say it was a successful operation. We didn't get our record. We had the ZF5T on the air as a multi, just a couple miles away on Cannon Brock, and they did a fantastic job, I have to say. But they did get to a lot of the bands before we did, like the low bands in particular. So no one needs the ZF Molt at that point. When it's always sort of been our strategy to usually try to beat them to some of these lower bands and get them get the Molt out there and get everybody to kind of call us first. But unfortunately, when they were multi, and they have a guy that can sit on 160 or 80, 2 hours before it makes sense for either of our radios to go there. That's just sort of how that kind of plays out. And it looks like they had a plenty fun time, and we had plenty of fun. We made almost 12,000 Qs. Again, it's not a record, and that's okay. I think we probably solid multi-2 North America top score. Subject to log checking, of course.
How many radios did you have going, Bill?
So we had 4 radios, so one run and one in band per side for the multi-2.
So 5 ops, 4 radios is less than one N6MJ?
Yeah, basically.
Okay,
that's about right.
Trying to do the math on that.
Exactly. No, I think even less than one KL9A too. I mean, it's just,
I just checking.
Yeah, exactly.
And Bill, obviously you guys were watching the online scoreboard. Any insight from watching that?
For the first, I don't know, day, it was always within 100 Qs for like the first, for just such a long time, and I could just tell exactly what Jose was saying was playing out there just based on, and I could see even Chris trying to make sure that he exploited the advantages that he had on the low bands and with the multipliers and such. So Chris was ahead in multipliers, and Dan was 100 Qs ahead, and it was like that for, I don't know, like the first 10 hours almost. I mean, maybe even longer than that. And they were just trading places constantly, and I knew that they would catch up, and I was just thrilled watching the whole thing play out. Really, I mean, I got a couple calls from Levi helping Dan out, right before the contest, of some things that were like oh my God, that you're on that, and I was a little afraid of how it was going to turn out, but. Man, Dan, you kicked butt, and so did you, Chris. I just can't believe how you guys stayed awake and managed to do that, because 5 guys equals 1 of you.
One thing I do want to ask you, Bill, is I was really impressed with your preparation for just contesting in general. People know how me and Chris train. We've talked about that a lot. But what is it for you that finally got you to that point where you felt like you were finally in the zone at ZF? Like, what were you doing training-wise?
Just a bunch of rough Z, or the Mac equivalent, which is QRQ, was the main thing. I've been just trying to run that at least 10-20 minutes a day, and just get the speed up, and just get that. And I turned off all the options where you can get a repeat of a call sign. So if I don't get it the first time, I don't get the points, and it slows down. So. And then also, I'd been sort of turning the speed up and kind of forcing myself to just deal with that, because it turns out that nobody does those speeds in the real world. But once you get it so that your brain can just copy that, that a little slower than that instantly, and it's no load on yourself, like physically. That's when you get into that flow state. And again, you guys have sort of always told me about it, and I thought I'd, had that a couple times, but it wasn't until this last weekend where I'm 100% sure that I was doing that for a good couple hours. And I just hope that, I know that if I practiced a whole lot more, that would happen again. And I ran, the pilot practice in DX log with Morse Runner, and I did a lot of single radio practice this time, because I wouldn't be doing any of the 2BSIQ stuff. I figured what I really want is just very thick pileups and being, having to deal with like a lot of guys calling zero beat, and that helped a whole bunch. Again, I tried to do that every day for, I didn't get to do it all days, but just because of work and all this moving and stuff. But it helped a lot, and I bet if I did that, as much as I had in the last couple of months, for the next year or so, I bet next year will be even better for me.
Yeah, I think the key that you hit on there is that you've got to get yourself to these speeds that you're not going to work in the contest. I think the max speed that I had, so I started out the contest at 48 words a minute, which is relatively fast, but when I'm doing rough sea, we're getting up into the 80, 90 words a minute range. When I'm doing the 2BSIQ training in DX log, I'm doing it at 60 words a minute sometimes, just to force myself to do something that's harder than what I'm actually able to do. And what ends up happening is when we're actually doing this on the air, it almost seems easy because now the guys that are calling us, they're not sending 48 words a minute, even though that's what we're sending. They're still sending 32, 36, but it's relatively easy at that point. And that's what the training does for you.
Well, you don't even realize, so it's crazy. It's like you didn't even listen to the call, but like another part of your brain, like a almost subconscious thing, actually got it. And that's crazy when it finally happens like that.
What's nuts that I notice after practicing is I'll be running on 2 radios and I'll type a call on the right radio and not remember typing it in. I won't remember anything. I just know there's a call in there and I got to hit the exchange because I was focusing so much on the other radio for, guy was weak or whatever. So yeah, it's the subconscious. It sounds super hokey, but it's a thing. So that's very cool, Bill. That's a really cool story of how the practice worked.
And Randy, how did the W1 station fare in W8?
Well, it was an interesting weekend. I didn't have to take any airplanes to get to my station, just had to walk out to the garage. Actually, since I really couldn't make up my mind which category I wanted to be in, because I really wasn't sure if the station was going to work that well or not, I slept 10 hours the night before the contest. I can't remember ever doing that before. I took a nap in the afternoon Friday before the contest started, so I felt great. And decided to do assisted because in the end I like working lots of DX and I hate tuning around and waiting for people to give their call sign. So assisted is to me a lot more fun. But everything worked great. Everything in the station worked fantastic, worked exactly as expected. The real challenge for me was to realize I'm not in New England anymore. Like, there's just, the bands don't open quite as early, the Europeans are not quite as loud, especially on the low bands. I had to wait in line a lot of times. I was really trying to practice my patience, which is very hard when you get to Sunday, and you're waiting for every other assisted guy to work the person that you're calling before you get your turn. But I never expected to make 4,000 QSOs from here, ever. And I just crawled over the bar in the last hour of the contest, and right now it looks like the #1 USA score for a single op assisted. There are a lot of other guys around the world who did that, so it's I'll be somewhere in the top 10. But just to build a station and move a station in 6 months and get it all built, and then have everything work, and then try to figure out the propagation and what's different and things that are happening at different times and kind of when am I loud and where am I loud and where am I not loud. I didn't realize quite how good my location in New England was, especially I knew it was good to Europe, but I forgot how good it was to South America because I used to never wait in line for South Americans, and this time I found myself waiting in line. So it's all part of learning a new environment, a new station, what works, what doesn't. I have a few things I want to try to do for next year, but overall, really pleased with the outcome.
I'm curious, Randy, did you see much difference to Asia from W1 to W8?
Not as much as you would expect. Yes, I could work more Asians. The openings where it used to be you would sit there and go, please nobody else call. I at least had a chance to have those guys come back to me. But the problem we're seeing in Asia is the growth in activities in Indonesia and China. And they're just, the way conditions were disturbed this weekend, they're just outside the line. So you could get the big guys but you really couldn't get into where the volume was. And the JAs, I never really had a JA. I worked 70 JAs all weekend. That gives you some idea. Like, the band was open enough that I could work the big guys, but not enough that I could ever get an answer. And that surprised me, because I did expect JA to be a little better than that. But it is only 600 miles. It's only 600 miles from where I was before to here. And you would think, wow, 600 miles, that shouldn't make a difference over these 5,000 mile pass. But it makes all the difference.
And I think part of that probably was because of the disturbed conditions. I mean, I was super shocked when I saw my numbers from EA8. Now, EA8 is very far from JA, don't get me wrong. But I was expecting to work a couple hundred JAs. It shouldn't be a problem. And I didn't even realize that on 10 meters, I worked 9 JAs. Like, I felt I worked a lot more in the contest. But I looked at the numbers, it was literally 9. And I think in the entirety over the 6 bands, I worked, it was like 104. That really shocked me. And I know that's a product of the conditions not being very good. But that was the only thing out of operating from EA that really surprised me was how hard it was to work JA from there.
Yeah, I don't think I worked one on 10. I didn't work one on 80, and I know you did. And believe me, I tried real hard at the right times. And it was a harder path than I expected to because of the disturbed conditions.
Speaking of cool contacts, I'm going to go into that real quickly from EA8. So one of those was the JA. So I knew I had to be on 80 at a certain time for this to happen. And generally speaking, if you're going for max rate, you're not going to be on 80. So Sunrise and JA, let's just call it like around 21:30 Zulu. So you had to be there either before that or right on that time. And so Sunday came around, and I knew I still didn't have JA on 80, and my only shot was to show up at Sunrise because, I'm busy working guys on 10, 15, 20, 40 at those times. So about 21:30 on Sunday, I show up on 80. I call a couple CQs, and sure enough, the one JA that I work called me right at that time. So it felt really good to, understand propagation-wise from EA8 that I need to show up at this time. It worked out. I worked with one JA, got my double mult. It was super exciting. And honestly, I know Chris mentioned this in his interview earlier, that those last couple hours were like super exciting. There was all kinds of multipliers calling in. I think for me, the most exciting time was the last couple of minutes. I didn't really plan to go to 160 at the end of the contest, but I had, it was VO2AC calls me on 40 meters. And at that time, I had already worked VO2AC on 5 bands. And so I needed him on 160. But the thing is, I already worked VE2IM on 160. So I had the Zone 2 mold. So he was just a QSO. But, he asked me for 160. I'm like, all right, fine, let's do this. So I go to 160. I work VO2AC just for the contact. And then this is like within the last 10 minutes of the contest. So I call CQ 160, and I get some decent traction there. Work lots of Europeans. I work SZ1A for a quick multiplier. That one's pretty easy, but I hadn't worked SV yet. And then I had this Wika that kept calling me. I'm like, man, I just wish I knew who this was. And then finally, after a few minutes, I finally pulled this guy out, and it was JT5DX. And this was double molt in the last 3 minutes of the contest. And I think Levi might have even got this on camera. I'm not sure. I was looking. I think the camera was recording at this time. I almost fell out of the chair. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. JT5DX is calling me right now. Like, this is super improbable.
That's awesome.
I was like, I couldn't believe it. And there was a bunch of guys in the shack at that point. Lots of guys came at the end of the contest to celebrate with me, whatever. And I was just floored. Like, I cannot believe this is happening right now. So anyway, that was the end of the contest for me. It was super exciting.
I was CQing on 20 at the end, and 9M2J called me for a multiplier. It was my last QSO, and it's kind of weird when that happens, but it's always amazing. Like, we had this whole weekend, and you're going to call me in the last 2 minutes? Both of you guys talked about hallucinations at one point, and I'm curious what you mean by that. I think I know, but I want to hear your description. Like, what was the hallucination? What were you thinking was happening?
I'll start. So for me, I'm CQing on 2 bands, and in my head, I was thinking to myself that I'm selling some sort of product. I don't even know what I was selling. But every time somebody called me, I'm like, yes, these guys are buying it, And that's literally what was going through my mind for 9 hours of the contest. And then there was one particular instance where I had a guy call me. It was WA1AR. Don't know this guy. I'm sure he's great. But in my mind, I was just literally thinking, like, does K1AR know that WA1AR has this call sign? Is he allowed to have this call? Like, and I was like focused on this for like at least an hour after this guy called me. Like, does K1AR know? You know, and so it was like always all kinds of weird stuff like that. You know, like, and it lasted a really long time. It was rough.
I think I mentioned, maybe I didn't, I don't know. I thought I was in Shamit for like 10 hours, and these guys would call me, and I'm like, why are they so weak? They should be super loud, you know, like a, you know, LEU or something. And it's like, I don't understand. And I'm like, oh crap, my antenna's pointed the wrong way. So then I think about pointing my antenna. I'm like, wait a second, I'm not in Montana right now. I remember, I think my last molt, one of my last molts was on the third radio. It was ZD7VJ on 15. And I'm on 80 and 160, and I'm tuning 15 on the third radio. And this guy's got this really weird flutter. It was like TEP, right? And it's from Montana. It's not a thing. So I hear him. I'm like, holy crap, ZD7VJ. So I work him. And I'm like, oh my God, I worked him off the side of the antenna. That's amazing. He must be so loud. I'm in zone 33. But I thought there was smoke in the room all the time. I would turn my head and I would see things like run across the table. I would see my mouse if I had to change antennas, and it would be like a nondescript thing, like moving. It was just a total. It was just crazy. People would pay a lot of good money for those experiences.
Well, one thing that I remember was, like, at the very end of the contest, again, I had 6 guys sitting behind me. I felt like everything was going well, and I don't know what it was. Maybe I wasn't really blinking a whole lot during the contest. I'm not sure. All of a sudden, I was blinking, and also, like, it felt like the room was like dimming around me, and I was just like in this total shock, like, oh my God. So I kept blinking again, and I would do it again and again, and also the lights would go out, and I don't know. It was super trippy. Like you said, people pay money for that. Do I want to do it again? No, but it was certainly interesting.
You only have to go through that experience a couple of times. There's something about, you do these contests over and over again, and they're fun and they're challenging, and it's great that you guys have each other to compete against, and you push yourself through these walls. But as you've done it many, many times, you start to lose the freshness, the newness, the excitement of it. And I think that's what you guys are right on the cusp of kind of going over that hill where it's like, why the hell am I doing this? And one of the things that I've done to kind of help myself with that is I just mandate, all right, I'm going to sleep 90 minutes each night. And could I have pushed through it because I had slept a lot? Matter of fact, when I lay down, I had trouble falling asleep. But it's like, no, I got to do this because I'd rather be awake during the high rate hours when the contest is fun than sit here and grind some 25 hours. The 08, 09, 10 Zulu hours in North America are no fun. So, hopefully, as you move forward, you can still do a single op. You just don't have to do it in the I'm going to hurt myself mode.
So since we're talking about this, I know we're going to get comments about the 48 hours should be reduced. So could one of you guys address that, or all of you? Should it be reduced from 48 hours?
I think Randy just hit the nail on the head. You don't have to do 48 hours. He potentially won his category by resting for 90 minutes each night. And 90 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is. And most people can get by with that. And honestly, you don't have to do 48 hours to do well in this contest. Now, when you're trying to do max scores like me and Chris, are we a little bit crazy? Absolutely, we're crazy. Okay, I fully understand that. But I really hate the idea of reducing the hours. People are talking about, let's do 24 hours or let's do 36 hours. Okay, here's the deal. I'm not going to fly to EA8, spend all kinds of money to operate the station, to have to sleep for 6 hours a night. Like that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. There are other contests out there where you do that. WPX is a good example. You operate 36 hours in that one. But in CQ Worldwide, you have the option to do 48. I would say there might be a dozen guys across the world that did 48 hours. And that's okay. Those guys were dedicated. They went all out, and, more power to them. But like I said, Randy's the perfect example. He maybe operated 45 hours out of the contest. he won his category. You don't have to do 48. I really don't think that limiting the hours is the key here. I think that, figuring out who your competition is, who you're competing against, and what the real benefit is to you for operating the number of hours is what the key is here. And I think that it should be open to the operator and what they choose to do. That's my opinion anyway.
The one time I won the worldwide phone for the world, I was up against 8P5A, and Tom always does all the way through. And I've asked him, why do you do that? He said, well, I don't want to, give up anything. I don't want to miss whatever I would have given up at being off. Well, I slept 90 minutes both nights, and I beat him. And I think it comes down to there is a trade-off, and you have to decide on your situation whether you'd rather have the mental acuity the next day versus those 24 or 50 hours during the middle of the night. So, but I'm going to agree with you. I don't think the contest should be changed. It's a little bit like saying, well, the marathon's really hard in the last couple of miles. Why don't we make it 22 miles instead of 23 and something? So if you make it anything less than 48, you don't give everybody equal sun and darkness time. And, the worst thing in the world, and there were a lot of complaints when I was running WPX where people would say, we go to this, I don't want to go to this island somewhere and then have to sit around and watch, and do nothing for some time. I've made the trip. Now, it turns out in WPX we have off times, and it actually helps equalize the scores from around the world. It was even better when it was 30 hours. So every contest brings its own little unique things to it, and the competition and the competitors adjust to it. But the worldwide being the kind of the king of the hill, I think straight up 48. And so few people do the whole thing that really it's not like we're putting a whole generation of people at risk here. We're putting guys who really know what they're getting into and are willing to pay the price to do it. And that's their personal choice.
So let's tackle one other thing that came up online. Should we be giving people days to upload their logs, or should they be given a day?
1 day, 24 hours. I don't think, I submitted my log the next morning because, Valor and I were talking for a couple hours afterwards, and then I just crashed out. But I think 24 hours is plenty of time. If you're traveling to a faraway place and you need an extension, whatever, I guess take it up with Seeker Worldwide. But there's no reason to submit your log later than 24 hours.
So as the guy who was in charge of the worldwide when we went from a month to 5 days, there were a lot of people complain about it. But there's no question there is a group of people in the world who are like, well, you give us 30 days, so we're going to use it all in whatever way to help wash their log or something. And so 5 days was pretty extreme, and there were a lot of complaints. And I feel bad because there's a lot of casual guys in the contest. There's only a very small group of people at the top who were really, trying to win the world. A lot of guys, they just go on and have a good time, and then it's like, oh, okay, next weekend I'll put my log in because I finally got home from work and I'm going to do it. And I don't want to lose those guys. we want all these logs to come in because they help, improve the log checking, but also they help demonstrate votes for the contest. There are people out there who really like this thing. So if we go to a 1 day, which can be done easily, it's technically not hard. We had 5,000 or 6,000 logs in the first 24 hours. So we've already got past the 50% mark in 24 hours. So we're not making a big hardship by moving the deadline shorter. But we do run the risk of a lot of people going, oh, well, that's too much work, I just won't. And that's what I'm most worried about if we were to change the limit. And it's very hard to draw a line that says, well, if you want to win a plaque or something, you have to be in this time, but everybody else gets this much time. There's something about that kind of people like, well, I don't know if I'm going to win a plaque, which the answer would be, well, just put your log in on time. But at the same time, that's kind of the balance point. K1AR is in charge of the worldwide now, not me, but you're trying to encourage. It's a party. We're throwing a party. We want everybody to come. We want everybody to have a good time. Yeah, there's this bit of paperwork at the end. We don't really want to make it seem like you got to kill yourself on Monday to get if your personal situation means I got to get on an airplane and go somewhere, or I got to go to work, or my wife wants me out of the radio because I need to go do a bunch of stuff. Whatever it is, we want to make it so that you can still compete in the contest and get your login and that kind of stuff. But I think there probably will be a shortening of the deadline coming up because, as we've seen, if you go to the logs received page on CQWorldwide.com right now, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, which is a long way, it's like 10,000 logs, there's a histogram there that shows you how many logs we've received each day from the end of the contest, and it'll show it. You'll see very visually just how there's a big bulk of logs that come in, and then there's always a batch of them right at the end. We get a bunch today because there are a bunch of reminder emails went out to people that hadn't sent their logs in. That spurs a little action, but anyway, long answer to probably, but I'm not sure what it'll change to.
Yeah, I think that 24 hours is a good place to be. So I submitted my log 7 minutes after the contest, but I'm going to be honest with you, I was literally almost dead after the contest. And so I was super fortunate to have Levi with me. I look over at Levi. I said, Levi, submit my log right now because I want to get this in. I don't want to worry about it anymore. And so he did it for me. Now, if it was me by myself there in EA8, hey, I would have gone to bed. I literally slept for 14 hours after the contest. And so... if I didn't submit it right at the end, I would have submitted it, when I got up in the morning. So I think 24 hours is about the right time frame for this to happen. Randy mentioned, almost quietly, the log washing thing that happens. And I think that, will some guys still do it? Of course they will. But it does limit the amount of time they have to, try and do things like this. So I think they're on the right track. I'm hoping that they go to a 24-hour window. And I'm sure they're going to have exemptions. And if you have a hardship where you can't do it in 24 hours, you reach out to the contest manager, and then they approve it, and then off you go. But for the majority of the people that are doing serious operations, 24 hours should not be a problem. So I'm all for that.
So the last controversial topic, contest online scoreboard, that came up a lot online. There are certain operators, some really top operators, that believe it should be mandatory.
What would that achieve? Besides, adding more spectators, but really, it's not a way you're going to detect cheating or not. Oh, another multiplier showed up in his log. I mean, log checking is going to find that stuff. I think it's great that the top competitors did it. I'm even more impressed that Dan and Chris didn't look at it during the contest, although they were busy, and I completely understand what a motivator or demotivator it could be. But really, I think encouraging it's one thing, forcing it on everybody. I don't know what you're trying to get out of that.
Let me give you a perfect example that happened during this contest. 8 Papa 5 Alpha, he wanted to submit his score to the scoreboard, and he did for the first however many hours. I don't know how long he was submitting, and then he had a computer issue, and he stopped submitting the score. Well, the thing is, he's not looking at the scoreboard, and he didn't realize that he was no longer submitting. It was not an actual conscious choice to no longer submit a score. So in that situation, let's say we are making sure that everyone has to submit it. Do we disqualify AP5A because he just didn't know? So I'm all for posting to the scoreboard. I think everybody should do it. I'm 100% behind that. But Bill brings up the exact point where, should it be required? I'm not on that train just yet because there are certain situations where it doesn't happen. And so what do we do? Do we disqualify the guy? And I don't think that's the right situation either. Now, I fully encourage everybody to please submit your score, especially the high scorers. But to make it mandatory, that always is a little iffy, gray area for me personally.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be mandatory. And partly because the infrastructure there are two different major online scoreboards, one in Russia and one in North America, one in Canada. And these are kind of personal effort by two different guys who are doing it. They're not funded by the contest committees or anything. They just are doing this because they're trying to contribute back to the hobby. And we did see a problem with the contest online scoreboard for a couple of hours where it got behind due to a programming error and or just some kind of configuration error, and actually stopped taking scores for a while. And then Victor managed to get it unwound and working again, and everything was great. But this is the problem when you start making something mandatory. That means the infrastructure has to be there and be supported in a way that it's super reliable. And on top of all this, no matter how much money we spend on infrastructure, if your internet connection goes away, you're not going to submit your score anyway. So just, I think what we need to do is, it's been amazing to me how long it's taken the online scoreboard to really catch on. I'm glad that it's starting to get there now. And let's just be happy that we have that as an option without going crazy about making it a requirement. And because I think Bill was spot on. I don't know what we're trying to accomplish other than make it more entertaining for everybody who's watching. That's about it.
Before we wrap up, I'm just curious if any of you have any comments about other operators. Certainly, there was a lot of focus over the weekend on the top operators, the four of you included, but there were a lot of other things going on the scoreboard. Maybe you guys were too busy to notice those, but any comments about that?
Well, I had the scoreboard set up, so my scoreboard was filtered to only show North America, so I actually didn't see Chris or Dan all weekend because there was just too much noise if you opened it up wide up. But I think Bracco did a fantastic job from Colombia. For a guy who doesn't have as much experience as Dan and Chris, just to drop into that environment and kind of figure it out. You could tell he must have been having a few challenges because it didn't sound as smooth at times, or it would cut out as he was switching back and forth. But to power through that. And then Andy at V47T did fantastic. I think he's going to end up over 10,000 QSOs after the log checking because he's got enough buffer. So that's a great accomplishment for him. And then to see CR6K once again get over 10K, that's the problem with being in Europe. You think the scoring problem is bad in North America to win the world. It's really hard from Europe where everybody's a one-pointer. So, there were some really great efforts out there.
I think one that stands out to me that we haven't talked about is Bud A3B from V26K. He it looks like he's probably going to set a new low power record. And, he's been doing low power for a long time now. And so, he's really good at what he does. He's always got a great score. But I think, I forget who it was, but it was the guy down in PZ. He set the record either last year or the year before. And it looks like Bud might have a chance at least to, do that record from 2-point land. So that's super inspiring. And then the other ones that were super interesting that I looked at after the contest were the multi scores. There was the clear winner is CN3A. That's pretty obvious. But second, third, and fourth place between TK0C, ZF5T, and PJ2T. I think looking at log checking, that's the most interesting race to me. They were all, let's call it a virtual tie. They were all really close to each other. I'm very curious to see how that plays out. So congrats to all those guys for sure.
Oh, before we wrap up, guys, any last comments?
I have one comment. I always do. I just, everybody that's, trying to learn this 2B SIQ stuff and break 10,000 QSOs. And, there's a lot of really, really good operators out there this year that have kind of honed their craft and shown us how it's done, and from all over the world. They've got 360 days left to train for next year, and Dan's retiring. That record's out there. So I'm just saying, I think everybody should try to break the record next year while the sunspots are still good. And you can still do it next year. I know Brazzo's going to Delta 4. He posted it on Facebook. So now's your chance, guys. If you want to set the record and beat the mighty N6MJ, keep practicing. Make Dan do it again. And I'm serious.
Oh, there's a slogan.
It's easy. It's easy to sit back and say, "Hey, I think I could do that," and you might be able to. But you got 1 year left while it's possible. So let's see those scores. I'll watch it on the scoreboard.
You heard it here. Make Dan do it again. I've been talking to Bill W9KKN, Chris KL9A, Dan N6MJ, Randy K5ZD, the contest crew 73.